Hey folks, so I did this quick video because I want to show you how we can be misled by stats. And I just want to show you the Canadian government is actually their information that is being used by media is actually very, very misleading. And as a result of that, there is policies being made, there are influencing the masses on how they act and what they will support and so forth. So let's take a little example I'm going to share with you. Recently, many of you have heard in Canada, you might have seen these stats maybe in other parts of the world, but let's just focus on Canada for a second, okay? So Global News, which is a big news media outlet here in Canada, their stats, their big headlines a couple of weeks ago were 90% of Canadians of Canada's COVID cases are among unvaccinated, feds say, right? So it's like, oh boy, okay, so this is the stat they're talking about, basically saying that, and in some of the news media, they're saying it is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. So when you go into and look at this, they say since the start of the vaccination, our cases reported are among 89% were among the unvaccinated. This is the epidemiology report, so we can go over there. So, starts to think, people think, whoa, okay, this is really a problem. We have to deal with it. So I went to this report to see what's going on, and this is what I got. So there's more to it, but again, this is the Canadian health information. You can look here, way up, you can see it's Health Canada or Canadian government. And let's go a little bit further down because we want to talk about these numbers that they're quoting. So I look and I see, okay, so it's actually saying 89, almost 90% of the cases are, yes, among unvaccinated, and only a small proportion are fully protected, which means double vaccinated and have had enough time for that, I think like 2 weeks to be fully protected. And that goes on for hospitalizations and deaths. They've kind of got the same numbers, right? So that seems, very alarming, and it makes sense that the media would pick that up. So, but what I thought when I went on, let's look at the actual numbers, and I went, wait a second, there's all, 500,000 people with that are unvaccinated cases, and I realized that the vaccine hasn't been around that long. So what are they talking about? So then I look closer at the information, and here they're saying that the date of the stats they're taking are from December 14th to July 17th. So I was like, okay, so that means from December all the way till somewhere in May or June, when we started really ramping up the vaccine campaign, all those numbers of people who were not even eligible for the vaccine are counted in this. So does that make sense? So let me look over here and go, okay. So I look at, this is basically same health info based Canada. It's just a different part of their website, and I can give you links to all this information. But if you look at Canada right now, we're at about 60% double vaccinated. This is double vaccinated, fully vaccinated, just for comparison measures, okay? And you can look when you double click on this, you might be able to. What you can see is at the very, did this, yeah, here we go. So you can see that you start to, this is the double vaccinated. You can see there's a few people, yes, but it's very, very small. It's really only even in June, you only got 13%. And in July, actually the date that this stat finishes is July 17th here, you have 50% of the population are double vaccinated. So essentially they're counting all of the cases that happened here, all the cases when really there was no coverage whatsoever, as unvaccinated. Okay, so basically, if we look at the cases from that time, December, we're talking about, in some cases, they're averaging 7 all the way to 3,000 to 7,000 cases. And we look at really the range that we're talking about. Hold on a second. The range. A second here. We want to talk about like this range here. So from kind of somewhere in mid-June to current, how many people really will want to compare apples to apples, right? Those are the people that had the double vaccination, to see if they were the ones that were having any cases or not. because if you're comparing all the cases that happened here to being a vaccinated versus unvaccinated, you're comparing two different things. So again, you look down here, that number in June, July, you're talking at low, a few hundred at a time. So you're maybe talking a maximum 10, 15, I don't know the number, I haven't calculated exactly, maybe even at the most 20,000 people in total in that that have been really exposed to the vaccine. And yet we look at the number of cases they're talking about is 500,000. So essentially in that number of 89%, it represents all the people throughout the whole time that were unvaccinated. So what would be a fair representation? Really would be by week to look at, let's take this week, for example, where you have almost 60% of the population vaccinated. What you should do is take the cases in that week, I don't know, they're 500 or whatever, and say of that, how many were vaccinated, how many were not. That would be a fair representation. And then you have to compare. You have to compare apples to apples because you have to do a weighted average. So if you have, let's say 60% of the population that are vaccinated, 40 or not, and in that same week of 500 cases, you find that, let's say 60% or let's say 50% even are of the unvaccinated, then you'd say there's a more likelihood that if you're unvaccinated that you'll get COVID because there's a higher proportion. You're only 40% of the population, but 50% of you are actually getting COVID. Or conversely, if you're saying that 70% of the cases are vaccinated, then you'd say that really it's not working, that there's an overrepresentation of cases relative to the population. That's something we call weighted average. We index things. You've heard that a lot. But why are they not doing that now? Why are they not indexing information? Why are they not taking a week at a time? Because as we saw over here, each week the number goes up. So down here, a few weeks earlier, we're only talking about 35% of the population. Here we're talking about 60. So as it's a moving target along, you can't compare. You have to compare week by week, or when it becomes flat. Let's say for the next 2 months, we plateau at 60%. Then we can really look at, okay, we've got a population of 60% for the last month, and that are versus 40% that are not. And then we can look at all the cases in that period of time and compare it to that split, 60-40 split. And if the cases are equal, 60-40, we know that the vaccine is not having an impact on cases. We can compare it to deaths, we can compare it to hospitalizations the same way. If indeed the proportion in that set of cases or hospitalizations or deaths are higher than 40%, then we know indeed that it is working, that there is a higher probability of evading infection. So you have to really do that weighted average. So it's really for us to look closely and see what these numbers and these headlines, and then putting in the Canadian government, it's their latest epidemiology report. And it's right on their website, all this information. And you look at it, if you don't dig any deeper, you go, wow, that's amazing. So why are they doing that? And is it just, lack of knowledge? Is it something that I'm missing? I'd love for you guys to tell me. Or is it intentional? Is this intentional to try to persuade people that not only should they be mandating things, they should be pressuring other people and so forth? Is that the reason? I'm not sure. I'd love to know what you think. And if you see these statistics any different than I do, I would love it. Love to find if anyone has a weighted average. Essentially, what I think they need to do is they have to look at a longer period of time into August and September, and then compare the cases. And when they do that, they'll be able to get a better view. And we're seeing that in other countries that have already they started the inoculation much sooner, and they had a ramp up much sooner, like Israel, and there's many countries like that, and looking at the same apples to apples. But a lot of times when we're hearing the stats from there, it's the same problem. You're not seeing a weighted average. You're not seeing it on a stable percentage. This is not stable as it's growing like this. It has to be a stable percentage, or you look at it week by week. hope that makes sense. That's from my basic stats. I'm not a statistician, so I'd love to hear if you have any other thoughts or ideas about this. So if you think this makes sense, please share, and look forward to hearing more from you. Awesome. Take care.